Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Common Grounds Community System Building Listening Session. My name is Leslie Gabay-Swanston. I am the Director of Program and Systems Quality here at the National Summer Learning Association. To get us started, I just want to give you a little overview of our session today. I'll start out with a little background on NSLA, the work that we do, and our new peer learning groups, Common Grounds. Then we'll hear from our presenters, Pam Paul and Kim Allen. Pam is the Executive Vice President, and Kim is a research analyst at the Jacksonville Public Education Fund. They're going to tell us a little bit about the summer learning and after-school system building efforts they have established through a coalition of partners in Jacksonville called Jax Shines. They'll also tell us about the report that they recently completed on the summer and after-school landscape there in Jacksonville. So NSLA is the only national nonprofit exclusively focused on closing the achievement gap by increasing access to high-quality summer learning opportunities. NSLA's goal is to increase nationwide the number of high-quality summer learning programs designed to close the achievement gap. To achieve this goal, NSLA recognizes and disseminates what works, offers expertise and support for programs and communities, and advocates for summer learning as a solution for equity and excellence in education. NSLA's work is driven by the belief that all children and youth deserve high-quality summer learning experiences that will help them succeed in college, career, and life. Core to our work is the recognition that high-quality summer learning works. High-quality summer learning programs have been shown to improve reading and math skills, school attachment, motivation, and relationships with adults and peers. NSLA also offers in-depth guides and resources in a number of areas. We do customized technical assistance, like facilitated professional learning communities, interactive training institutes, program quality evaluations, and community assessments. So these peer groups that we are starting, currently there are 4 of them: early literacy, one for middle grades and older youth, this one for system building, and 4th one for policy. These groups are an intersection of our program and systems quality work. It's a way for us to continue to disseminate and generate awareness in these areas and offer strong interest-based content. So you'll hear us call them various names. The official name is Common Grounds, but you'll also hear us call them affinity groups or peer groups. Just to conceptualize kind of what we're thinking of doing with these groups, maybe you've been a part of a PLC, a professional learning community. It's not going to be quite as intensive as a PLC, but we're hoping it to have it be more interactive than, say, just a regular message board or something like that. Our hope is that these affinity groups will provide regular briefs on relevant research, best practices, and program spotlights, and offer you a way to interact and learn from your peers. So with that, I will turn things over to Pam and Kim to tell us more about the work they're doing in Jacksonville.
Great. Hi, Leslie. This is Pam, and I just had the pleasure of being with Leslie at the Wallace National Summer Learning Program PLC that was held here in Jacksonville with 4 of our peer cities from around the country. So it was great to see you there. And Kim and I are really happy to have this opportunity. Leslie, I'm going to first ask you, if you don't mind, to scroll forward to the 4th one of our slides, which actually gives a timeline of the work here in Jacksonville that I think will help the participants on the webinar.
Actually, I think you might be able to, if you have control, you can go ahead and scroll for it.
Oh, I do. That's so great. Okay, apologies. Thank you. So, So the Jacksonville Public Education Fund actually has a mission of improving public education for every child in Jacksonville. We've been around for about 7 years now, and have been advancing various initiatives using research and data analysis, advocacy and communications, and community mobilization to improve visionary leadership at our schools and to engage the community more in demanding a high-quality public education system. And then bringing resources into the district. And then the last thing is helping to align community efforts that are going into improvements for schools or directly to students in our public schools. So as part of that alignment work, we got involved with some of the major funders in out-of-school time here in Jacksonville. The Jacksonville Children's Commission is a long-standing entity of the city of Jacksonville, which has received dedicated funding for at-risk children's services, has about $20 million it receives from the city, and about $10 million that goes to after-school and summer learning specifically. And they had received a Wallace out-of-school time system building grant back in 2011. And they had done various things to try to make improvements with the providers that they were working with, really along the lines of improving quality practices and the collection of quality data. And they did things like creating a locator tool, an easy way for parents to find information about programs that were available. They brought in WICART, which is part of the Forum on Youth Investment, to use their quality assessment tool. And they've done a lot of trainings among their providers. And then at the same time, our district had a grant from the National Summer Learning Program. And that was to demonstrate the value of a high-quality, intensive academic summer learning program, and that it could, in fact, increase math and reading and social-emotional learning gains among students if it was implemented effectively. So the district had been doing this program for the last several years. It was targeting fourth grade students, very, very defined, specific, research-based model. RAND Corporation was involved in tracking all the data for Jacksonville and a few other cohort cities. And so what they found was, indeed, and not surprisingly, if you had all the elements of quality, highly effective teachers, national norm curriculum, quality enrichment, that yes, students would, in fact, increase their gains in math and ELA. The kicker was it had to be students who attended very frequently. And so they found the biggest challenge among all of the cohort cities was really focusing on strong and steady attendance because those gains are really only made by kids that are attending regularly. So anyway, we had these two different grants, and we were offered the opportunity to bring them all together through a partnership between the Children's Commission and the district and Wallace, and then it eventually involved the Community Foundation as well. And that partnership agreed to hire the Jacksonville Public Education Fund and really have us serve as an intermediary to help all these partners to determine how to move forward on building a system that encompassed both quality summer learning and after school. And so early along in our process, we were fortunate to get connected to the National Summer Learning Association. And one of the things we were really impressed with about the work they had done in other cities was their framework for creating landscape analysis and the role that a landscape analysis could play in really helping a community assess opportunities and gaps and provide the data, that really would prompt decision-making and bringing partners to the table around the need for a citywide system. So I'm going to hand over to Kim and have her walk you through the process of the landscape analysis that we did.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Allen, and as Leslie said, I am the research analyst here at the Jacksonville Public Education Fund, and really worked with Leslie and Pam and the steering committee between the Jacksonville Children's Commission and the other entities to gather some information on what our after-school and summer programs were doing in the city. And this process turned out to be very involved, as Leslie advised us that it would. In the first round, when we tried to gather information, we went to a number of providers that had been identified by the Jacksonville Children's Commission. The United Way were the two largest groups here who had after-school and summer learning programs. And we reached out to them, had them to send us an export of their after-school programs. And what we found was that between all of the different individual providers, everybody collected information differently. So some organizations might have had program focus while others did not. Some track the number of kids they serve on a daily basis. Some track the average daily attendance, which sounds the same but is different. And so what we had to do was create a standardized template to send out to providers, and I think that many of those, probably all of them, are on that slide just before this one. Pam will show really quickly. But we were able to reach out to 17 of providers, which sounds like a small number of providers, but those groups provide the majority of free and low-cost after-school and summer learning programs in the city. So we reached out to 17 of them, and with this standardized form, asking them specifically, what is your budget? Check these things if your program offers, for example, a cultural and arts focus or summer jobs focus, and really had to create that standardized form so that we would be able to compare apples to apples and be able to present the information that's on this next slide. And we learned a number of things from this landscape analysis, one being that of these 17 providers, we had 306 unique sites that were housing programs that were serving nearly 36,000 students, and that is that's not an unduplicated number. And the investment was really about $37 million that were going into after-school and summer learning. And then you see the breakout for summer with 16 providers. One of the programs did not offer summer programs, but only after school, with 127 unique sites serving 13,000 youth at almost $9 million. And furthermore, for this particular group, they had the question of, how is the funding panning out so we can potentially reallocate funds or help providers to secure more private dollars. And we saw that, the main source of revenue initially was the service fee, so the amounts that parents were paying to have their children be enrolled in a particular program. And that was the case in after school and summer, but during after school, we saw that the city was providing the next largest portion at just over $10 million for after school. But in the summer, the district was providing the largest portion of funding for summer learning programs, and that included summer school, which was, just state mandated summer programming that is offered in our school districts. And so really the information that we were able to gather here helped to inform the process, of which I think Leslie was just here, so she heard a little bit about it, and the rebidding of contracts to providers so that we can make sure that the dollars are going to programs who are providing high-quality after-school and summer programs, and making sure that those dollars are spent in ways that actually show gains and improvement for the student.
Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to add some of the things that Kim's data collection and analysis surfaced for us are in a more comprehensive report, and we can send a link to that. But we found out, really drilling down in the zip codes of highest economic need, that there were about 20% of students from those zip codes participating. And just to give you a snapshot of our district, which we didn't really talk about, Duval County Public Schools serves approximately 125,000 kids, has about 180 or so schools, and certainly there are many areas of concentrated poverty. And a couple of takeaways we had, we're fortunate, as I've mentioned, to have the city and the Children's Commission really having a dedicated focus and funding source for at-risk kids. And so there's been certainly a value around placing programs in highest need. At the same time, 20%, doesn't sound like it's getting to the threshold of the percentage of kids we really would like to be serving. So, the kind of value that you gain by having this data available is, sort of impressing folks with the extent of the investment. I mean, $37 million is quite a significant amount of money, significant number of kids served. And the learning that came out of this, I think, really set us up to be able to make some strong recommendations for how do we maximize this investment, and make sure that we're directing it towards the kids of highest need. And then the next conversation we wanted to have was, and how do we really improve the quality so that, we're generating the greatest impact for these kids. So I'm just going to talk about that a little bit. First, let me just go back here. One of the recommendations that came out of the landscape analysis, and we had a steering committee working with us, and I should mention that NSLA, in addition to landscape analysis, had a tool that we used with our steering committee for assessing our system as it existed then, and the dimensions, really matched up well with the Wallace System Building Initiative, and essentially they are around quality, which we're going to talk about, and how is quality defined, what standards of quality you have, how are you measuring that, how are you building capacity for that. And basically what we found was there had been a lot of discussion of quality and introducing people to quality, but there really wasn't a clear understanding of what quality meant, particularly among the service providers, even across the funders. And that, in all the grant funding available, there really weren't any specific expectations around quality. So that made it pretty easy for us to make some recommendations around that. The second dimension was around data. And it's very difficult, to improve quality if you are lacking quality data. The city, as in many kind of big funders, was requiring outcomes from after-school programs that we had learned, really aren't necessarily realistic outcomes to achieve from after school. So things like kids in after school programs would improve on standardized tests in schools. And so this really gave us an opportunity to look at the research, what are the data points that are being collected, how, how are other communities considering the ways that summer learning and after school, really have the ability to move outcomes for kids. What are those outcomes? So a lot of really productive conversation around that, and really allowing us to move away, from, sort of these, sort of not the right kinds of outcomes to be thinking of, but to focus instead of what are those indicators of quality and what are the more important things to focus on, things like students' attendance to programs, where they really hadn't set a clear bar on expectations around student attendance, and now we've learned how critical, frequent attendance is to kids being able to accomplish any outcomes. And then the next dimension on this planning framework was really about, about your leadership and your coordination. So, do you have leadership aligned around a shared vision? Do you have any structure for coordination? And again, there are a lot of assumptions made, that the partners and the funders were on the same page with regards to a shared vision, but there really wasn't one that was clearly stated. And so you can see here, we now have a purpose and a learning vision. And we have created a coalition, which we call Jax Shines. So again, going, and it did take us 9 months so going through the process of doing the hard work, of doing the landscape analysis, and working through this process of assessing where we are on these dimensions of quality, data, leadership, coordination, really set us up for success. And I'm just going to flip again to our timeline. Down here in the middle, what I tried to establish here is, we're not working together, in these two different grants, and we did have some collaborative activities, but it really wasn't until we had the landscape analysis, produced our report and recommendations, that we got down to these two boxes where we started to see significant movement in changing the system. And as Kim mentioned, the Children's Commission agreed to rebid all $10 million of their funding for summer learning and after school, and making clear expectations around adopting a quality framework and setting standards, and also providing resources for supporting the provider community and moving in that direction. We have another funder, the Jax Journey, and they adopted the same approach. So they took the funding that they had available, about $2 million, and while they're taking a slightly different tack in a deeper focus on literacy, they adopted the same quality framework, the same vision, the same goals. We've had others work with us, the Florida Institute of Education, but we're seeing this sort of quick uptake of this idea that we really should shift to quality. And for a city like Jacksonville that's kind of been slow to the quality movement, we've politically been pressured to always serve more kids. So it's a really big shift that the city's been willing to focus on quality. And then I just wanted to give you a quick look at our Big Five goals and the sort of quality framework that we're focusing on. This was developed by our partner, the Florida Institute of Education. We've seen a lot of this kind of thing among our peers in Boston. I forgot the name of theirs, but Kim did a lot of research on social emotional learning, and of course there a wide set and many skills there, and we felt for our community to be able to wrap its arms around the idea that we were shifting expectations from things like improving school grades to really the power of after school and summer is they can go really deep in building these essential skills that kids need to be able to learn effectively and to navigate their way, you know, through to all that comes with being a student in school. And so this is all new for us, but it's given us something to really hang on to and a way to easily convey to funders and the providers, you know, what are we really trying to accomplish? And then, you know, the training and the assessments, you know, all follow along with this. Did you want to add anything on that? Okay. Okay, so I've spoken quite a lot, and I'd love to pause and see if we have any questions.
So if anybody has any questions for Pam or Kim, you can go ahead and type those into the Q&A box. I'm going to take back control here. And as you guys are thinking about those questions that you might have, I just want to go ahead and give you a little bit, some of the ideas that we've been thinking about for this group. Well, sorry, first of all, thank you, Pam and Kim, for the great overview of your systems building work, and I think it was really informative, and I should be able to include the link to the report in the follow-up materials to this webinar that will be sent out. For this group in general, what we're thinking about as we move forward is having more discussions like this where we have, you know, some of your peers come on and talk about the work that they're doing, getting some peer-led discussions, presentations from some of our Excellence Award winners, maybe other content experts, bringing them on board, and just providing a platform for peer exchange. We also have our national conference that we have every year in October. So right now we're planning to have some kind of meetup for anybody who's attending to do an in-person meeting with your peers and talk about and get together and have a little mini PLC there at our conference. So those are some of the ideas that we have for kind of talking about trends and stats, best practices, looking at recent research and things like that. But we'd love to hear from you ideas that you have for the group, questions that you have about the group in general, questions that you have for Pam and Kim. Well, we have them here with us today about the great work that they're doing there in Jacksonville. So as I said, you can go ahead and type your questions into the Q&A box that you'll see at the bottom. If you would like, you're all muted right now, but if you, underneath your name, you'll see a little hand icon. And if you click on that, I should be able to unmute you if you want to go ahead and just verbally ask a question. So I'll pause for a second to let people type their questions in or raise their hand. And kind of while we're waiting, Pam mentioned that she and I were at the Wallace Summer Learning Project PLC in Jacksonville this week, and so I wanted to ask you, both of you, kind of what your experience has been like being part of that peer learning community, and kind of what you've gained as being a part of that.
Sure, it's really been a fantastic experience. Wallace holds two PLCs a year, one in the fall, one in the spring, and we've rotated around really visiting the peer cities, which have included Dallas, Boston, Rochester, Pittsburgh. Am I missing one? and they are each unique, but they're certainly shared learnings that we've all had. And, you know, their summer learning initiatives range from, you know, being very district-directed to other cities. Boston and Dallas have very, very strong community intermediaries that really take on the responsibility of, you know, raising funds and coordinating the partnership with the school district and all the aspects of system building, you know, from building capacity around quality and data collection and, you know, serving as hubs for data, where in Boston, they are using, I believe, the National Institute of Out-of-School Time tools for assessing quality practices. And they've really generated great buy-in from their nonprofit community by offering these assessments and then to do the analysis and put back out kind of dashboards of how programs are doing on these different dimensions of quality and how they compare to the average for the cohort. And that's really allowed them to build this huge community of providers who are very committed to quality and to data, and I think it's really helped, too, with the funders to see that. We had a particular focus on really communicating the value of summer learning. And what Wallace has brought is, you know, they've got experts in the field of communications, how you frame messages, you know, how you would differentiate your messaging to different audiences. And learning things like what families really like to know, and Kim's shaking her head because she's a mom of 2 young children. And so, you know, we've got to be so careful about how we message to parents, you know, and not over-promising what might be happening. I mean, if it is a remedial program, then don't, you know, explain it as, oh, this is a way for your student to leap forward this summer. And what parents are really looking for is, you know, that they'll be learning, their students will be learning, but they're going to have fun. So that's just sort of an example of, you know, some of the discussion that we have. We cover, you know, federal policy, funding that's available, and that kind of thing. So it's really been of incredible value to all of the cities.
That's great. Yeah, and I know it's been really informative for me just to be able to sit at the back of the room and kind of hear you guys talk about the work that you're doing and the different best practices that have come up during the work. If anybody wants to share what they are doing and where they're with their system building in their community, feel free to do that as well. Or if you have any questions for Pam and Kim, go ahead with those. I know during the meeting that the mayor of Jacksonville stopped by and gave a little welcome to the group. So what was the process like for getting the mayor and other leadership on board with this? Well, in our case, it's been pretty challenging, to be absolutely honest. Part of that, I think, is you get in a new mayor, a new administration, and, new mayors, new elected officials like to develop their own agendas. And so this mayor had a huge agenda around crime prevention. We have sort of the very unfortunate distinction in Jacksonville, to have been called over the last few years the crime capital of Florida. Way too many shootings, killings, just as many urban cities are dealing with. We have a lot of the same issues. And so that being his primary concern, he turned to the Jack's Journey, which was a crime-focused initiative.
Now, interestingly, the Jack's Journey had also been investing in summer and after school, really as a way of keeping kids safe. And so this was an opportunity to try to get the mayor to see a sort of bigger vision of how summer learning and after school, you know, can do more in building all kinds of skills in kids, not just keeping them safe, but really getting them on a trajectory for success in school. And I think that he has come to embrace that, but it's taken a while for us to have that conversation. The other way in that we found to the mayor's agenda is he is a big fan of sort of data-driven results and brought in data analytics and really wanting to make sure that the city's investments were achieving results. And so the landscape analysis that we had, other data analysis that we had, the focus on data quality, I think really resonated with him as well. And then the third priority he had is alignment, that he was able to bring in a director of strategic initiatives that was actually funded by the philanthropic community to work between the city and the community on big initiatives that really needed to be better coordinated. And so that's exactly what we were doing. So I think, you know, by sort of sharing those three ways that we connected with his agenda, we got more support from him. But that is a work in progress. And the next steps for us are to continue to work, you know, closely with the Jack's Journey and the Children's Commission as they implement these RFPs, and really the provider community to support them in their attempts to make this shift to quality, and to figure out how we're going to sustain this intermediary role. That is a new role that's being played in Jacksonville. It's hard, you know, to raise money for, you know, a coordinating entity. But I think that everybody has seen the value in that. You know, if there's one entity really focused on, you know, how do we continue to move this system forward and specific priorities that we have, then it's much likelier to get done.
So we have a question from the audience, and from Jane. She's asking, where does the community begin? We have scheduled a meeting with community organizations and school districts. What would you suggest we try to accomplish at this first meeting? So are there any kind of key first steps and recommendations for communities getting started?
Right. That's a really, really good question. You know, having done this for quite a while, you know, and if it's a very, very first meeting, I think I would begin by really listening to what other folks are doing around the room, and trying to avoid making assumptions. You know, I think, you know, one of the things I've learned is that it takes a while to get everybody on the same page. You've got to build relationships. You need to build trust. And so I would do something like, you know, letting everybody share, you know, what they're doing. And then the other thing that we've found is sort of using the opportunity to lift up people's aspirations for what could be possible has been a good way for us to start when we're starting something new. You know, to pose some questions around, you know, what would that group really like to see happen for their children as far as summer learning or after-school opportunities. Super simple questions, but to keep it aspirational, and that allows you to stay away from negativity It also allows you, to see how connected everybody is in the room, because at at the heart of it, we all care about the same thing. We might be doing things differently, but we all care. So I would start with that and build from there. Kim's more the researcher, process person, so she might have some other suggestions.
Yeah, I agree with that, Pam, and I think also in that allowing them to share, they will hear each other as well and likely form some relationships on some common goal that they didn't even realize that existed, because in general, I think what we found is a lot of groups are doing some of the same things and they just don't have the opportunity to come together and talk about those things. And so being in that space where there is this opportunity to hear from other groups and what they're doing and what they are experiencing, they learn a lot from each other.
Right. I think it's really important if your desire is to, help lead a community, that people can start to see you, as a convener, and that's a really important role. And, the convener really needs to be a fairly neutral person, who's able to sort of manage, a lot of diverse interests. And above all, convey, the overall goal. But I think, I think people eventually start to really appreciate that role, especially if you're bringing people together. They see value in that, because they often don't get to exchange with each other what they're doing, learn from each other. And just that exchange is of value, as Kim said. But then I think, that sort of documenter role is really big, because if people don't receive something in the way of, this is what we discussed, these were our points of agreement, these are some of the things that we thought we could do together, then nothing's going to happen. But they really do value that they see somebody is taking the time to record these conversations, to record agreements, to send that out to the group, to get that, sort of let's share and, just to be kind of moving things forward, setting the next meeting. And so my advice is just to be as humble as you can, because some people fear if you're putting yourself forward that you're trying to take control in some sort of way. And, again, it goes back to relationships and trust. And so I think, some of those strategies can help you begin to build that.
Yeah, I think a lot of I speak to a lot of communities that have been kind of going around in circles a little bit with their plans around summer and their system building, because they're not doing those steps of kind of making sure that they're documenting what they're going on and coming to consensus and sharing out that information. And it helps people really have something to come back to and kind of grab onto, so that they're really more invested in that. I think, and I'll go back. Let me flip back a couple of slides a little bit, to one of the things that you had on these slides, this vision that you have for the collaboration. And like you said, that takes a while to get to. And I think it's really one of the first things that, as a community, you need to kind of come together around. And I know I've had communities when I'm working with them during that very first meeting, just starting to think about, something simple like, when we think about summer in our community, what words come to mind? What is our vision? What is summer? What do we want summer to mean in our community? And starting to have those conversations so that everybody's starting to think on the same page and coming and moving towards developing that shared vision, which I think is really the basis of the work moving forward. We have another question. how do you ensure that you build on learnings from past summers to drive more strategic planning for upcoming summers? So I'll let you guys answer, but my short answer is collecting the data and documenting and reviewing, going back. But I'll let you guys answer that.
Well, that's worked for us as well, and, if if you can get to some agreements around what data that people could collect and learn about. Last summer, and of course with the National Summer Learning Project, there was a big emphasis on data collection, but last summer turned out to be the first year that the school district, which was running the program, really focused on collecting its own data. And that was a partnership between the school district and the Children's Commission. Children's Commission actually provided the funding for the enrichment portion of this intensive academic summer learning program. And so we had a very gung-ho director of data and research at the school district, and what was done was, of course, student attendance, student enrollment was collected within the first week or so, and then those student records went to her office. She matched those. She's definitely an A-type overachiever, but she went back and collected, all the test data on those students to have a sort of preview of them coming into summer, and then in the early fall, matched those summer learning attendees with their fall test data. And so that gave us an amazing picture of how the students that participate in the program did, and she was also able to analyze it according to attendance levels, which, as we've discussed before, is probably the most important factor, aside from having a basic quality in your program, but the attendance. And it definitely showed, again, just as the RAND study showed, that the higher attendees had the best results. So what they did was, rather than just put that, in a drawer at the district, is they worked with us. We convened and had a great collection of the nonprofit partners and some administrators from the schools to walk through this data and what could we really take away from it. And it really was the first time that those folks had focused so much on the importance of data. But once they, heard it, the light bulb went on, and they started to develop strategies around, how could they be more strategic in how they're recruiting the right students to the program to generate better attendance. How could they create more incentives and motivation for families, and things like field trips and really special opportunities to be included. Things like what we want to end in order to keep kids the full length of our 6-week program. We're going to have a talent show at the end. We know our families like to come see their students, and we know they'll keep them involved. So it was the data that really allowed people to begin to strategize about what things they could do differently in the following year to make improvements. Mm-hmm. And it's also great relationship building again. I mean, it's just another opportunity to bring people together that don't have a chance to share their experiences in working with kids, what their challenges have been, what they've learned, and they've got great ideas to share as well. So it's pretty simple to do a learning debrief like that, but it really goes miles as far as setting up more successful future strategies.
Yeah, I think that's always that debrief. It's always a great opportunity for people to share and to make plans moving forward. Some of you might be familiar with our NSLA has a guide, a program planning guide. The summer starts in September, and it's really focused at the program level of how programs develop a continuous cycle of improvement throughout that goes throughout the year. but I think that can also be applied at the system level of kind of having that debrief at the end of the summer, having a central document like an action plan of that is both includes long-term things and also kind of immediate plans, and revisiting that once or twice a year and coming back to that and saying, okay, where are we? This is what we said that we wanted to do. How have we moved towards that? Where have we kind of fallen off, and how do we course correct? So I think having just continue to document and share out those ideas and having those times where everybody comes back together and looks at the big picture is really helpful in moving a strategic plan forward. So we are almost out of time, but if anybody has any final questions, go ahead and type those into the Q&A box down there. So I guess we'll wrap up and just ask Pam and Kim if there are any future steps, future plans that you're looking forward to this summer.
Yes, we're working on a joint summer learning communications campaign, and our communications manager here is working with her counterpart at the school district and the city to coordinate messages to parents to let them know, how important summer learning is, what opportunities are available, and, trying to make links, to enrollment really, really easy. And as I mentioned before, we're also going to be involved with training the nonprofit partners who will be working on a new framework for their summer learning programs, as well as working on after-school programs. And then the third thing is we're talking to the partners and the funders about a sustainability plan for Jack Shines itself. What does it take to actually continue the coordinating intermediary roles that have been really important to getting the project to where it is now.
And from a data perspective, we are working with the Children's Commission in developing their training for the summer group, because they now, each provider has to have, or each site that a provider has to have a data manager whose sole responsibility is to make sure that data gets entered accurately. And so we are a part of the process of developing that training.
Oh, that sounds great. So I thank you both for joining us and sharing all of this with us today, and thank you to our attendees for joining us. So I want to continue to get your ideas for the group. I want to make sure that everybody's following us on Twitter and liking us on Facebook so you hear all the new announcements of work and opportunities that are coming up. Like I said, I'm going to be sending out some follow-up information, follow-up materials in a little bit, probably today or tomorrow, and so you'll get those. I'm going to include in there a link to a survey so you can continue to ask questions, give ideas for the group, and just really shape what this group will become, and we can figure out what kind of topics we want to do, if we want to continue to do webinars like this, if maybe you want to present on a webinar. Just love to hear all your thoughts and ideas for that. So with that, we'll wrap up, and I'll say thank you for joining us. If you need to contact me, my email address is right there, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.